To make the Merlion Labubu costume, we'll be using the Seat Labubu, fabric glue, a darning needle, a pair of scissors, blue fuzzy yarn, and white chenille yarn. Both of them will fit a 4mm hook. We also have some decorative items like beads and rhinestones and stitch markers. The stitches used in this project will include the single crochet, double crochet decrease, slip stitch, and a chain stitch. I saw these pictures on the Pop Mart website of the Merlion Labubu, and I thought it's really cute and I'd like to have one. But since it's a Singapore exclusive, I know that I won't get one. So I decided to crochet one, and this is my interpretation of the Merlion Labubu. Here I made the Labubu all-purpose hoodie using the same yarn that I used to make the Merlion body. But because it started to get bulky towards the back here, I decided to stop at row number 7 rather than going through the whole pattern. By doing that, it became more snug and the front didn't come out as far. And because we'll be adding a row of trim for the hoodie after we put on the mane, I think this size works for this yarn. After making the hoodie, all we have left to do is to make the mane. We're going to start by making the center portion of the mane, and then we're going to move on to the other 2 sections. To make the center mane, we're going to start with 6 chains. We have our slip knot and then our 6 chains. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then we're going to make 2 more since we're doing a double crochet, and then in this 3rd crochet here we're going to make our double crochet. And then we're going to put our stitch marker on that. Then we're going to go into our next stitch for crochet number 2. Then we have number 3. Number 4. Number 5, and in this top stitch here we're going to do number 6, 7, and 8. There's number 6, there's number 7, and number 8. And then we're going to do number 9 in this another stitch here. Then number 10. Number 11. Number 12. Number 13, and then we're going to do one more up top, number 14. And now we're going to start with our next row, but we're going to turn this over so we have it the right side up. And let's count our first row. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Now we're going to start on our next row. We're going to do 14 single crochets all the way around. There's one. Let's put in our stitch marker. And we have 2. 3. And 14. And we're ready to move on to our next row, and then we're going to end it by sewing in the end. We're going to do 14 single crochets all the way around. And there's one. Let's put in our stitch marker. And we have 2. 3. And here we're on our last crochet of our 3rd row. Then we're going to fasten this off. So not coming up, so I'll just cut it right here. We're going to pull through, and before we close our little pocket here, we're going to stuff it. You can add more stuffing than this, but that's all I'm going to put in there. And then we're going to use whip stitches to close it. We're just going to line them up. I'm going to use the first one on the bottom and then second on top. And then I'm just going to make these whip stitches all the way across, lining up the stitches. Oops, got caught there. And then I'm going to weave in the end. Cut it. Now we're finished with our 3 rows of double crochets for our front hoodie mane. And this is what it looks like when we make it in our chenille yarn. We'll also be using the same pattern to make the middle mane with 7 rows, and we also close the ends. For the 2 side rows of the mane, we're going to start with 3 chains. We're going to make our slip knot and start with 3 chains. We have 1, 2, 3, and since we're doing a double crochet, we're going to add 2 more chains. 1, 2, and that's a total of 5. And in this 3rd crochet here, we're going to make our first double crochet. And we're going to get our stitch marker and put it in this double crochet. Then we're going to make our 2nd crochet. And then in this top crochet, we're going to do numbers 3, 4, and 5. So there's number 3. Number 4. And number 5. Try that 5th one more time. And then in our next stitch, we're going to do number 6. And then in our last stitch here, we're going to do number 7 and 8. And now that we're done with this row, we're going to turn it around so that we have the right side up. I'm going to cut this tail off because it's really long. And let's count our crochets here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and number 8. So we're going to start on our next row. We're going to make our first double crochet. And I put in our stitch marker. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, number 6, number 7, and here we have number 8. So we're going to continue making these rows of 8 double crochets until we get up to 18 rows. And then we'll make another pair of 2 with 3 rows for the front of the main, and then finally one with 26 rows, which will be the 3rd main in the back. So here's how our first one will look with our chenille yarn, and this has 18 rows. And here we also close the end. And this is how it will look with the 3 rows of stitches, and these we'll be using on the front of the hoodie on the sides. And this one here, we have the 26 rows of the 8 double crochets, and here we left the end open just in case if we need to take away from it or add on to it, because sometimes the stuffing of the main can make a little difference in how many rows we have. So now we're ready to sew on the first part of the main, which is the rectangle. So I'm going to turn the Labubu around, and I'm going to place this in the middle of the hoodie. So I want to make sure that it's centered, the hoodie is centered. And I know that these 2 parts are the end and they should match with the ear. So I'm going to take this part of the mane where it's rounded, and I'm going to place it in the middle, starting at the top of the hoodie. So I'm going to get this knitting needle and I'm going to place it through the hoodie and through the mane. Okay, so now we have this main piece centered on there, and we're going to sew it in. Before we sew in the main, I'm going to remove the hoodie from the Labubu. So now we can sew it on more easily because we could bend it as we need, and we have to go into the inside to sew this on. We're going to start by going through the first stitch on the hoodie, and then we're going to go into the first stitch on the middle main. And then we want to have enough yarn so that we could make the stitches all the way around the main. And then once we get started, we're going to go into the next stitch on the main, and then through the hoodie, and then back up the hoodie, and then through the main. And then we're going to do the same thing on the next stitch. Again, we're going back up into the hoodie and then into the main. And now we're on our final stitch here for the top of the main. And we're going to continue making these stitches all the way around the main until we get back to where we started. At the bottom of the middle main, there should be 2 rows of double crochets left, and then you're just going to sew it right on top of that double crochet. So when you get to this portion here, it should be sewn on that line. Right across. So once we're done sewing on the center main, we're going to get our second piece, and we're going to line it up with the top, and then we're going to go around the center so it looks like a U, and they should both end up at the top flush with the hole of the hoodie and the center main. So like this. We're going to sew it on starting with this center section. So we're going to sew this part to the center. We're going to take our needle and line the corners up and attach them together. So here is the first stitch on the second piece. So we're going through that first stitch there, and then we're going to go through the first stitch on the main, the center main. We want to have enough yarn so that we can go all the way around, and then we're going to go into the second stitch of the second part. So we're going to go here, then up here, back up into the third stitch of the second portion of the main, and then through the stitch on the center portion so that they come together. We're going to keep doing this until we go all the way around. Once we're finished attaching the center main to our first side main, we're ready to do the other side here. So we're going to do it all the same way, stitching it all the way around, but when we get to the bottom here, we want to keep one row open. So we're going to have to stitch the main to the hoodie right here on this line where the rows of the 2 double crochets meet. So we're just going to start going all the way around now, and then we'll be back when we finish. Now that we're finished with our last stitch of our second row of main, we're ready to move on to the third part of our main. For the third part of our main, this one is going to go in the front here. So this is the front of the hoodie. So it's going to end up in the front and then go all the way around in the U shape. So we're going to pin the front to the front of our hood. So here I have the knitting needle and I'm going to pin it so that it's on the front of the hood. Okay, and then I'm going to take it all the way around and then back to the front of the hood. So it's going to end right over here. I think I'll put one more pin, a couple more pins so that it stays in place. I'm going to pin another one just using a darning needle right in here. And then we're going to go towards the bottom and then end up at the top again. So we're not going to end here, but we're going to end at the top of the hoodie, right up here. So let me put one more here. I'm going to pin it right here so that it doesn't move. And then we're going to go to this part of the hoodie. And it looks like it's the correct length, so we're just going to sew this part together. Now that we measured out this part of the main that goes from the front to the back, we're able to sew the end. Before we can put this on, we have to put the main that goes on the top of the front of the hoodie on first. So here I'm just going to fold this down, and then I'm just going to match this up with the other one. And then I'm going to pin it. And then here, I'm going to be sure that I have one row left so I can add more trim to it. So it's not going to be flush with the end, but one row prior. And then the sides will go on. It goes this way. We want to put the curved side on the front. And then we have this side. So I'm going to pin these here. I'm going to pin this one. So once we have these in place, we're going to sew them on, and then we'll be back after we sew them on. So now that we sewed on the front of the hoodie, we're going to add the last of the main, which goes all the way around and to the front of the hoodie. So it's going to start here, and then it's going to go all the way around the hoodie. And it's going to end up back in the front. So like this, and all the way to the back. So it kind of looks like a rainbow in the back here, even though it's supposed to be squared off. We can try and square it off, but we're going to sew it on like this. So we're going to put our needle in. and then go all the way around and bring it forward. So it's like this, and on this bottom part we want to have it on that last stitch of crochets, on this last stitch here. So it should look like this. So now we're going to sew it all the way through. So when we start our stitches here, we're going to start in the front, and then we're going to go into this part of the mane so that they go together. So we're going to go into the next stitch on this one, and then go into the stitch of this one. So we're just going to go back and forth all the way through. Okay, so once we get all the way around, then we're going to do the outer part. So now we're done sewing on the last part of this mane. For me, this side came out better than this side. It has like this angle, but it's okay. I might be able to fix it later, but I kind of like the way it looks. So now I'm going to get the Labubu, and I'm going to put that right on to see how it fits. So once I have it centered, I'm just going to tie it on, and it looks like it's pretty cute on. And so now I'm just going to crochet one more row of the trim here so that it's nice and bushy on top. So now we're going to make an extra stitch on the trim here just to make it look a little fluffier. So I'm going to start with a slip stitch right before the strap. So in this stitch right here, I'm going to get the yarn, and I'm going to make a slip stitch. And then I'm going to start with single crochets, and I'm going to do single crochets all the way around. So just start in here and just make single crochets. So now we're finished with the trim on the Labubu hoodie. It's not as fuzzy as I thought it would be, so I might do another row. But now we're ready to put this hoodie onto the Labubu along with the Merlion suit. Now we have our Labubu, and I'm going to dress her up in this costume. I'm going to put her legs in first, then the arms. I'm going to pull this up. So here we have her dressed up, and she can swim. And now I'm going to get our mane on our hoodie and put that right on there. Tie it on the bottom. And now we've completed our Labubu Merlion costume, and we could, make her act like a fish or a mermaid. Speaking of mermaids, here are some mermaids that we made using this pattern. And this concludes our Labubu Merlion crochet video tutorials. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video useful or interesting, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, please hit subscribe. Have a wonderful day.